be moderating the session about digital trade for SMEs and finding a seat at the table. As we all know, in Africa, we are most of our businesses are SMEs, so I can't wait to hear what our panelists will be sharing with us about what are the digital trade solutions for SMEs. So go ahead and start off with Mr. Dayvee Ngugi. He is the CEO of Anzili, and I think he's logged in. So Dayvee, really the question that I'd like you to answer today is, first, I would like you to introduce yourself, and I'd like you to share with us your story. What is your story about Anzili, and how did you come up with these solutions for SMEs to support them in digital trade? And if you could also let us know what Anzili is doing to allow SMEs to expand across Africa. Welcome, Dayvee.
Thank you, Anne. I'm excited to be here, and a very good morning to all the panelists, and greetings to whatever time zone you're in. So I am Dayvee Ngugi. I'm CEO and co-founder of Anzili. And Anzili is a platform that enables businesses to be able to begin selling online and across multiple channels by taking advantage of the platform that we built to build their own websites, receive payments, and also to do fulfillment everywhere, or basically across the world. So the story of Anzili started back about 7 years or so, and at that point, it came through a practical experience that we had. Having been in the industry for several years, we realized that the available digital platforms were not quite well suited towards building an online presence, especially for small businesses. For larger businesses, they would take advantage of the larger budgets and be able to move online. But especially for SMEs, it was quite a challenge. Trying to put together whatever solutions were there was quite expensive, time consuming, and ultimately didn't deliver. And that's how we came up with Anzili. And right now we are able to support over 4,000 businesses just in Kenya alone. And we are able to help those businesses to be able to participate in global trade, because as long as they're on the Anzili platform, then it is very easy for them to be able to sell their goods and have them fulfilled to any part of the world. They can get paid by someone, whether they're in Malaysia or the US or wherever it is, and we should be able to make the fulfillment happen for them. So it's quite a new innovation that can help a lot of these businesses.
All right, thank you, Dayvee, for sharing your story and introducing yourself. I can attest to your solution. I heard about it from a friend of mine, and I referred your solution to our clients, actually Eva's Events and Flowers, who are actually exhibiting today here at this Africa Trade Conference. And the interesting part about it is they already had their own website where they were doing events, and they needed an e-commerce platform. And as you mentioned, the issue for them was cost, because they're on SME, right? The issue was time. How do you build a whole e-commerce? And the fact that they just went into Anzili for a small amount of money, and they were able to get a payment solution. They were able to have an e-commerce site, and you actually deal with the logistics. So basically it was a holistic solution. So I'm glad that you're here to actually tell people practically there's solutions for SMEs, and it doesn't have to cost a lot. So thank you, Dayvee, for sharing your story. So then I would like to then bring in Mr. Sachin. Mr. Sachin, you're the CEO of Gapstack. I like the fact that I went to your website and I saw that you state that your value proposition is to ensure that your clients trade made easy, manage all their business transactions, both locally and globally, in one platform. So can you tell us more about the services that you offer, and how is your solution supporting SMEs in Africa? Welcome, Sachin.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all participants on virtually in Kenya and outside Kenya. And let me start off with what the problem is. A lot of studies have shown that access to finance is the #1 obstacle for businesses. I mean, The Economist came out with a report last year in 2020, 1 in 4 in sub-Saharan Africa face that problem. That's the #1 challenge. And historically, digitization in the financial space has mainly been focused in payments, and that has happened a lot more quicker. When you look at the trade side, it's lagging behind. And post-COVID, it has shown that digitization needs to happen across the board. Friction slows down supply chains. And this impacts goods and services. Not being digital itself is a disruption in the value and supply chain. So our aim is to make trade frictionless. I mean, we are powering financiers to take financing to the tail end of the value chain. I mean, you've heard panelists talk about banks and large corporates. What about the SMEs? Those are the engines of the economy, especially in developing countries like on our continent, right? Mm-hmm. And we take it from end to end, from digital onboarding to local trade and cross-border trade. What do I mean by that? I mean, for large corporates, a lot of it has been digitized because they have the capital to do it, they have the relationships with the banks, be it local or international. And when we try to say, what about SMEs within the value chain of the corporate or outside the value chain of the corporate, how do they access financing? So what we have done is we have enabled financiers to deploy capital efficiently and businesses to access financing where they want it, when they want it. And like a social network, a business can then invite their suppliers, their buyers into the ecosystem. And they may not necessarily bank with that particular bank, but they can then open up to, for financiers, be it a bank or a fund, to step in and finance that particular transaction. And even more so, local supply chain can be digitized to a certain extent. Cross-border trade becomes even more complicated because trust is at the heart of it. As we saw in the previous panel, there's a lot of parts which is still paper-based. And the beauty of our platform is still we're able to ingest that information, even though it's paper-based, to really using power of AI to help digitize those value chains. At the end, for the SME, whether they're part of a value chain or not, with our platform, they can access financing, all kinds of financing, the financial products that a bank can provide or a fund can provide, such as purchase order financing, invoice discounting, bonds and guarantees. If they want to apply for tenders, bid bonds, we have digitized that entire process, even cross-border. So even applying for a letter of credit can be done via our platform. And at the comfort of their own home, via self-service, via an app, via the browser. So we want to make it as easy as possible and remove friction from the supply chains and the trade finance, access to financing for businesses.
Wow, that is a great solution. I'm a banker by profession, so I know a lot of businesses, their main issue, as they say, is access to finance, although sometimes it's more than that. But I love the fact that what your platform is doing is saying beyond banks, the alternative sources of funding. And we are going to connect you on this platform. And it's all digital, whether you're whether you're an SME or a larger business, you're saying we're in Africa, this is something that is actually put together for the developing world, and you can be able to access funding, which is, like I say, music to the ears of to most businesses. All right, thank you, Sachin. We'll get back to you in a little moment. Now, I'd like to welcome Acheaw. Acheaw is a business lady, and I'd like you to tell us more about your business, because I would really, really like to know what it is that you're doing at the AfriBeauty Collective. And can you let us know how you're using technology? How you're using technology to improve your processes, how you've been able to manage inventory, and how you're using this technology to ensure that you are taking part in digital trade. Welcome, Acheaw.
Thank you so much, Anne, and welcome to everyone. It's great to be on this panel. As a business owner, I founded AfriBeauty Collective, or African Beauty Collective, 2 years ago. And this was based on a key need that I saw myself as a consumer, which was to access beauty products on the continent. And one of the key insights that drove me to actually start the business was realizing the value behind this. So Euromonitor values the beauty industry in Africa right now to be about $10 billion. Over the past couple of years, Tracker, which is an influencer platform, has seen a 57% increase in the amount of consumers who are generating beauty content on the continent as well. And what is also really interesting is that 60% of the over 1.2 billion people on the African continent are quite young, which means that there's a huge propensity and huge ability for us to grow within the beauty industry, because we're targeting a young consumer bracket which will adopt certain beauty regimens over time. And one of the key issues that I found is that I'm born in Ghana. I was born in Ghana, I'm Ghanaian. I was raised in South Africa, and I'm currently living in Nigeria. And I've traveled quite extensively through my work, previous work working for FMCG, such as Unilever, British Petroleum. And for my own needs, personal needs, beauty needs, I realized that when I was in Nigeria, I couldn't access some of the products that I saw in Kenya or in Ghana. So my solution was, why not have a platform that can basically consolidate and aggregate everything in one place? So my friends who are in South Africa who are asking for products such as black soap and shea butter that are specialist products in West Africa, I provide that solution for them. And on the other hand, was also looking at the trade and the economic side, where I have many small and medium-sized businesses, predominantly owned by African women, who are also employing other African women who didn't have access to other markets, such as, because they lack the logistics or payment platforms. So for me, I had to try and connect everything. So AfriBeauty essentially is a platform that connects our brands, African beauty brands, and provides the platform for us to be able to make payment easy for our consumers. And we partner with logistics. So I think ahead of what many solutions have become now, where they integrate everything, I had to outsource everything. So build my platform, find a payment platform as well, which was Flutterwave, founded in Nigeria, get local and international logistics partners. And I'm currently based in Nigeria and South Africa. So I have customers who purchase products in Nigeria, and we're able to aggregate the products from South Africa, Ghana, and Nigeria on one platform. And then in South Africa, they're also able to access that. And the payment process is quite easy. However, it's been quite challenging to not only manage inventory. We use our website is WooCommerce, and everything is integrated on that platform. So we're able to manage inventory. However, we also get a lot of manual requests. So we haven't yet found a complete solution to be able to address that. You also have consumers who are requesting for your product on different digital systems. So you have social media, you have WhatsApp, some people will call in, and you have to manually integrate all of that to ensure that the consumers get what they need.
Okay, so interesting. So you come in and you say, I'm a business person, I've seen this problem in the beauty industry, I'm going to be the aggregator. So anyone who wants any kind of African beauty product comes to us. So you create it. But what you're saying, the challenge you're finding is, of course, you have solutions in logistics, you have solutions in payment, you mentioned Flutterwave, but then there's also still, not everything is digitized. So you still have to have a lot of manual processes. So the solution as a business person is to find something, you like a solution that would be able to make sure that if you get orders from social media or your website, everything is actually digitized, so you don't have to go through the manual process, because that takes time, and as we know, time is money, right? Did I get that correct, Acheaw?
Exactly.
Okay, great. But at least I'm glad to hear that you have a payment solution which is African, which is Flutterwave. I've heard of Flutterwave. But you mentioned about logistics. Could you share who your logistic partner is? Do you have just one, or do you use different logistic partners?
I have had to look at different logistics partners based on the need of the market, and I work backwards based on the consumer. What is the consumer prepared to pay? So looking at all the competitors, I have to be able to ensure that my logistics partner is able to help me get to the price point that I know my consumers are willing to pay, or what they expect to pay, even in comparison to bigger platforms, bigger e-commerce platforms. So I've had to have a hybrid solution where I look at international logistics partners such as DHL, local partners, and also some SMEs as well, who are freight forwarders and who help in terms of clearing, customs, ensuring that my product gets from, whether I'm getting a product inventory from Ghana, they're able to clear that for me all the way into South Africa. So I've had to use a hybrid so that I make the solution or the price point much more effective and competitive for the consumer to actually want to be part of our community.
Okay, great to hear that. And DHL will be with us in just a little while. So I'm glad to hear that you're using them. But then what you're saying is you have to come up with a hybrid. It's not just one logistic provider. It just depends on where your client is, whether they're international or what it is. So I think maybe improvement of those logistics would be actually better for you. Okay, thank you, Acheaw. So go ahead, and I see, oh, Leonard has joined us. Hi, Leonard, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I had a bit of a technical challenge, but I'm glad to join you now.
Okay, thank you for joining us. So Leonard, you are the Executive Director of the Center of Trade and Business Environment, and you do advocacy work. So I don't know if you heard about all those fantastic tools like Anzili, who's dealing with, creating this solution in both payments, logistics, e-commerce side, and Gapstack really solving the issue around access to finance. I don't know if you heard about what they say, but really we know that there are very many tools that SMEs are taking up to increase cross-border trade. But then we also know from a regulation perspective, the legislation that is happening in various countries is sort of lagging behind. Can you tell us more about that? What it is that you're doing in the Center for Trade and Business Environment, and what are the considerations that need to be taken in to allow technology to improve more intra-Africa trade as we take things to the next level, as we take advantage of the AfCFTA? What do you think needs to be done from a regulation perspective?
Yeah, thank you. And so basically, the Center for Trade and Business Environment Advocacy, CTB, what we've tried to do over the years is to address the regulatory and policy issues, and to some extent, the entrenched attitude that makes it difficult for some of these technology to receive wider penetration within the African market. And of course, the position of the MSMEs is quite peculiar, because while big businesses could set up their supply chains and optimize using partnerships or using proprietary technology owned by them, the MSMEs would have to rely on collaboration. They'll have to rely on policies that enable solutions that could be deployed at the smallest unit. So yes, I commend what the entrepreneurs are doing, the payment systems, the aggregation systems, and that. But if you look at it, the most African countries, maybe with the exception of few, but I'll use Nigeria as an example. I mean, I work out of Nigeria and then focus mostly in the regional West African region. The regulators are usually slow to catch up with these developments. And of course, in a place like Nigeria, the issue of open accounts is still a major issue, because the central bank would insist that every export, and I mean every export, there's no rule of de minimis, as we say in international trade, to say this is too little to be excluded. So long as it is export trade, a full container, just a few tons of an item, would have to go through the process of a letter of credit, not just, not letter of credit, the export repatriation form, which we call NXP here in Nigeria. So that means you're going to fill that form. And the central bank is going to monitor whether you repatriated your export proceed from the banking channel or from any other approved forex dealer. Now, if you put this side by side with the demand or the need to digitize payments in international trade, then you realize that the regulators and policymakers are way behind what the MSMEs and the entrepreneurs in the market are doing. Just a few days ago, we were in a conference here in Nigeria talking about factoring in international trade. And this is something that the Afreximbank has tried to develop to promote in Africa, including in Nigeria. We've done some work as an organization on this with the GIZ in Nigeria. And the questions persist. Why don't we have a regulatory environment? And some of the issues that came up were this. Number one, there's this issue of trust deficit. So how do you discount invoices, or how do you perform factoring transactions in an environment where you don't have platforms where you can verify invoices, for example? That's the problem. That's where digitization ought to come in, to have these kind of platforms like Akos was talking about, to have these kind of platforms that should be able to ensure end-to-end confidence on the part of the MSMEs that are dealing in it. We've made progress in payment systems, but payment is not just enough. Most African countries have foreign exchange control. So how do you navigate those foreign exchange control? Then we will come to, in terms of the domestic infrastructure to enable most of these digitization process. Now you have two divides. I'll put it this way: you have a tech world that is fast in developing solutions that could be adopted, and then you have the MSME world that seem to be detached a bit. I mean, apart from the very few highly educated ones, the people who do the main business are somewhat detached from what is happening in the technology world. So that raises the need to step down the awareness. And that is, where the kind of thing you're doing now comes on. We need to know who are those in the market who offer these solutions. The trader or the shoemaker in Aba, which is an industrial hub in southeastern Nigeria that services as far as the Central African market, would need to know what the solutions are for them. So that means people need to go to them, talk to them. People like Akos will need to go. I know that's not her own line, to talk to them, or even to adopt this system of aggregation, and then do the trading, so to say, on their behalf. So between those who develop, those who utilize, especially the direct producers, those who make the policy, and I like what Acheaw said at the close of her own panel, that maybe we need to bring all these people into a room, and that's basically what we do as an organization, and tell them you need to talk to one another, and come up with solutions. And until you come up with solutions, we're not going to let you go out of this room. So undertaking this kind of reforms are what we need. Maybe I'll speak again later on what the AfCFTA could contribute, in driving this kind of reform. And that's where we begin to talk about issues like maybe your certificate of origin, or using QR tagging, to verify the origin of products and all that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Yes. So I like what you're saying. And I think what stood out for me was the fact that you mentioned that, or I felt that you're saying in the tech world, the solutions are coming up, right? So as business people are saying, I see this solution, I see this problem, access to finance, logistic, whatever, and I come up with a solution. But then we have a problem when it comes now to, in this case, government and policy and regulation, because government is slow, or we're looking at it countrywide as opposed to continental wide. So if I'm going to go into Nigeria versus Senegal versus Egypt versus Kenya, I mean, it's just too many problems. And we're trying to make sure that we're able to do trade in Africa. So there's an issue with government, but at the same time, the business community, the traders, are not taking up these solutions because they're not aware about them. So we have the solutions, but we need to fix these two extremes: the public sector and the public, the business community. So, all right. So I think I would like you to think about it. What does the how do we engage with the African Union and the AFCFTA Secretariat to make sure that we come up with solutions for this? Because we need to support the business community to participate in digital trade and to make sure that this is happening. So think about it and I'll get back to you. All right, so I will go back to Sachin. I mean, for me, when you were talking about access to finance, like I said, I've been in this space, I'm a fintech enthusiast. So what you're doing is definitely needed. I definitely see that. But then again, we know that the law taking up takes time. There are all these regulations, different jurisdictions in Africa have different issues. For example, I know here in Kenya, digital lending has been, there's been so much issues around that because it feels like a lot of people are being exploited. So the banks are regulated, the sort of the microfinance are regulated, the SACCOs are regulated, but the funds are not regulated, right? So these alternative sources of funding, it's really new to these government places. So there's a lot of talk and a lot of people are saying, no, we need to stop that digital lending. But we know that most commercial banks are not lending to the micro, small, medium enterprises because there's a risk association to that. So tell us, what are you doing? What is Gapstack doing to navigate all these different jurisdictions? How are you in Kenya? Then now you're in Botswana. Then now you're in Nigeria. And every law is different. How do you provide this solution to these SMEs if you have to deal with regulation that is 54 countries in Africa? Like, how do you deal with that?
Thank you, Anne. I mean, it's a very, very valid point that you put across. You know, regulation is always going to be there, and no matter how fast or how far technology goes, it will always be ahead of regulation. But it's very important that we have that engagement with all stakeholders, including the regulators, and even more so the regulators. So see how we can collaborate. The buzzword or the keyword has to be collaboration in this ever-changing space. When new models come up, new technology comes up, we cannot do it in isolation. We have to sit together at the table and say, how can we help the desired individuals or businesses to receive that, in this case, access to funding or financing in a reasonable manner, in an affordable manner, right? There's a lot of predatory lending out there. Of course, then there's pushback from society, etc. But by looking at how we can work together to, one, make the journey smoother, two, make it frictionless, and three, make it affordable to all, so that whoever comes into the space knows, or this playground knows, these are the rules you have to play by, and everyone knows that these are the rules, so that we all have that predictability in that aspect, right? But by talking to various stakeholders, we have to be able to also facilitate trade, for example, right? We need access to data. I mean, in Kenya, we have gone far by digitizing and giving access to data. So you can access the BRS, which is the business registration services. You can access the tax compliance, etc. Those are being digitized. Now imagine those is being digitized and opened up across the continent, even more so with African Free Trade Area. KYC would become a breeze. I know who I'm dealing with. I know the credit score. And we can help monetize that as Gapstack, right? For the governments are struggling to find, how do I monetize that data? And Kenya has done very well. And by adopting these things, we then make facilitation of trade faster. Look at what was discussed in the previous panel with M-Letter, e-bill of lading. Which African country has adopted it? Not a single one. But we should be in the frontier space. We have an opportunity to leapfrog and say, how can we adopt this new technologies that has been done in Asia, been done in Europe, but trade is huge in Africa, be it cross-border or inter-Africa trade, or out of Africa trade, or into Africa trade, imports into Africa. So it is very, very important. For us, as Gapstack, we operate within different jurisdictions by providing the rails for digitized trade. What do I mean by that? We enable the financiers to then percolate it down the value chain. So if a bank wants to deploy capital, like they will deploy capital to large corporates, they will deploy capital to maybe medium or well-established businesses, but lower down the value chain, the tail end of the value chain, it is still manual. If a bar owner, if a small business in Kibera wants to access financing today, he has to go via predatory lending. Why can't he access affordable financing via institutions like the financiers, the banks, who can then provide much cheaper? But by getting that data, they can then enable a risk profile that makes it easy for them to provide financing. Because they don't have that KYC data, they sort of struggle and hence perceived high risk. Now imagine you have transactional data. How often does that SME in Kibera transact with their supplier? Via our platform, you can do that. How often is he or she buying goods from a value chain? How often is he or she making payments? Those data points then enrich the credit score for that particular business, even though they're in Kibera, but every business is aspirational. I want to grow. I want to go from one business to a chain of businesses, even if it's within Kibera, right? Or even if I'm an established business in the central business district of Nairobi, I have an ambition to grow. But if I share my data points, which on the platform you can see by raising purchase orders, invoices, when you see those data points, you see the transactions, you have the historical data of those transactions, you can then start providing tailor-made financing solutions from the financier towards the business. You know exactly what that business is doing, how often is it doing, and where is it doing, who are the suppliers, who are the buyers. And so for us, I mean, in not so many words, Gapstack is built for multi-jurisdiction, be it from a regional bank perspective or an individual bank perspective. We can deploy across countries. We are a cloud-based platform. So connecting via APIs makes it very simple. We have soft touch integrations. So to move into a new country takes hours for us, not weeks or years.
Okay, wow. So it's easy for you to expand. You're very scalable. It's very easy for you to do that. But then there are other things that need to be sorted out. I really liked what you were talking about, data, and data is king. And that's something that we lack in Africa. But I think you understand from a banking perspective, this MSME, the deal size is so small, it's manual, it's so costly, and then they don't have collateral. I mean, there's so many things that make traditional funders go like, we're not touching this, right? Yeah. But when you look at it from a volume perspective, that's who you need to be servicing, right? Because the volumes are huge. So we need to come up with solutions around that. How do we get KYC data so that we know who it is that we're dealing with? How do we get trade data so that we know these people are actually trading? What are their revenues, what their expenses, so that we know how we can be able to give them information. In fact, that's some of the things that Regal Africa we've been really looking at. How do we go beyond collateral-based funding? How do we get cash flow-based funding, especially when we have these digital platforms where we are actually seeing the trade happening, right? So it's easy for a funder to say, look, I see these volumes, I will lend this person based on their cash flow, not based on their collateral. And that will then tremendously help women and the youth of Africa who own these SMEs who don't have that. I think maybe Acheaw can even tell us two things. One, you know, you're a young woman in Africa. I don't know if access to funding has been easy for you, because I know that is a challenge for a lot of our clients in Regal Africa, because there's the issue on collateral, right? So most women don't have collateral, or young people don't have collateral. And so then how do you get funding to grow your business? Can you share with us some of the solutions you've seen around funding? And then the other thing I'd like to know from you, Acheaw, is look, the last 20 months, since last year when, you know, everything got shut down because of COVID, you mentioned that you get your supplies from all over Africa. So let us know, have you used technology to solve this issue of your supply chain? What are you doing in regards to that? So two questions around funding and around supply chain.
Thank you, Anne. So the funding situation, or the funding hurdle, which is it's quite a hurdle, has been definitely a pain point for myself, as well as some of the brands or suppliers that I represent. And because I'm a professional, I currently have a portfolio career. I'm full-time marketing manager, and this is a business that I have started on the side as well. And obviously over time, I plan to move into it full-time. But because of my portfolio career, whatever savings I've been able to get, one part is whatever savings I get on a monthly basis, I invest in my company. And then secondly, I've been fortunate enough to have friends and family who have been able to support my business. And when I've spoken to the merchants or the brands on my platform, it's been a very similar story. Working portfolio careers to save money to invest, and then looking for funding from friends and family, because access to funding such as banks, they come with very high interest rates, double-digit interest rates that we see on the continent. Most of them are quite risk averse. I've been very fortunate to have a sister who is in banking, so she's been very strict with me in terms of what I need to do to be able to, one, even get funding from her, or even try and prepare to approach a bank. So that has been a major hurdle. What we've had to do is help each other in terms of structuring payment solutions or payment processes. So first looking at, number one, what are the payment terms that we will have between the merchants, right? And then being able to then use that to build inventory to provide to our consumers. But currently what we see now is that there is the access to grants for females. There's also access to, you know, as I've seen over time, cheaper funding from banks. But a lot of us are quite hesitant to get access to that until we've gotten to a place where we know that our business is, you know, we feel confident enough to get access to that funding. But it's definitely a journey that we're going on. One brand that I can give, for example, a Nigerian brand, over the past 5 years has been able to garner up to over 20,000 consumers who purchase their ticket items are over at least $10 per person on a monthly basis. So they've now been able to, you know, save money, reinvest, build a factory. And a lot of this was the founder working from home, having a portfolio career to try and keep her costs and expenses down. On the other hand, your second question, which is about supply chain and how COVID impacted that. For me, it was a very interesting scenario where we had to approach other SMEs that were still operating and were finding innovative ways of operating. So firstly, in cross-border trade was quite limited. I had, at the beginning of the pandemic, around March, when it became quite clear that there was going to be a lockdown, was only operating in Nigeria. And when the lockdown happened in Nigeria, we couldn't really move. And during that time, I used my time to work on setting up operations in South Africa. And luckily, by the time that a lot of the restrictions were lifted, we were able to then work with a freight forwarder. I was able to get products from Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and bring them over to South Africa and vice versa. But COVID really hindered a lot of things. It was only when the essential services mandate came up, where personal care and beauty fell under, that we could now engage the likes of DHL. And DHL has done a great job in giving a lot of small, medium-sized businesses like myself access to much lower rates based on the volume that you do. So it goes back to the data point. So capturing that data has been very, very important for us to be able to show. I had to use that information to my international courier partners such as DHL to show them this is the volume of customers that I get on a weekly basis, monthly basis. And what we also have to understand is that from a lot of SMEs, I think it goes back to the point that Leonard was making, is that we are still working on a very manual environment. My consumer journey is, well, a lot of the consumers who approach us they don't just use digital platforms, right? A lot of them will call us because there's a lack of trust in accessing some of these websites. So they want to hear a human voice, and then they'll send you a bank transfer. So then how does my website record that data? And I have the bulk of that information to share with my stakeholders, such as my logistics partner or my bank. There's no solutions. I've had to create a system. I work on an integrated Excel solution where all the calls that are come in, I have to record manually. My website, my website orders, I have to record manually, because that rich information gives me enough information or substantiates why I will then go to, you know, approach finance options or go to my different stakeholders to get much lower rates. So it was quite, over time, when DHL was able to support, then we saw the smaller logistics partners also come on board to support us as well.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your journey around your supply chain issues and finance issues, and that is definitely going to be resolved. But it's just not only in Africa. When we talk about funding, you always have to start from the 3Fs: your family, your friends, and find angels, right? No bank is, I mean, I used to work for Bank of America in the States. We never gave any money to startups unless you had some kind of collateral. I mean, it doesn't happen anywhere in the world. So I always say, as Africans, we have to start from there, whereby it's your savings, your family, it's your friends. But then that means we need to have more angel investors in Africa. And that's another conversation that we have, which we actually had at the Africa Wealth Conference back in July. You mentioned something about building trust. So I think African businesses need to build trust for their company, so people know that if I actually buy from you online, I will get what I actually purchased, and then trust of the product, that when I buy this brand, the product that I get is actually a good product. So that is something that businesses should be challenged to make sure they're building a brand that people trust, so that then more digital trade happens. Thank you very much, Acheaw. So then I go on to Dayvee before I reach out to Mr. Jason at DHL. I see you've been doing a great job for SMEs, and Acheaw keeps repeating DHL has supported me. So I'm really waiting to hear what you have to say. But for you, Dayvee, like I said, I have interacted with Anzili, and I know that you're able to offer SMEs the solution of an online presence that is an affordable price. But tell us, how are you able to help businesses track their goods? Like not even, let me rephrase that. Me as a customer who's bought from somebody who has their platform on Advocacy, how can I track that this product has left the business and it's coming to me? How can I choose whether I would like it to come air, ship, road? Like, we really need to understand from a customer perspective, how does your solution ensure that the clients get what it is that they're going for? Because they've come to your platform and they've already chosen a good or a service and they want it delivered. What is it that Anzili is doing to make sure that this customer experience is a great experience?
All right, thank you. So for Anzili, we are a B2B platform, which means we solve problems for businesses like like Acheaw spoke about earlier, in regard to trying to put together a platform that actually would work for her business with all these different moving pieces. And what we do is with Anzili, just to backtrack a little bit, we're able to bring together, the integrations, whether it's to the social platforms, the payments, the logistics partners, and we put them together, in one system, so that for you as a business, rather than trying to find how to get all these things to work together, it becomes, you're able to better focus on what you're good at. Because the biggest issue with trying to grow a business as an SME is that there are not a lot of solutions, especially at the price points that would make sense to an SME. And that is what we've tried to solve through Anzili, because we enable businesses of any size, from the small business that someone would start in their bedroom to an established brand, to adopt digital tools and, begin being involved in trade. In as fast as an hour, you should be able to have a website that is up and running, receive payments, do fulfillment of orders anywhere across the world. The other thing that is of critical importance is data. Data is basically the fuel of growth for an SME. So being able to allow these SMEs to be able to collate all these data from the different sources, whether be it the data of who their customers are, their orders, their inventory, and being able to put together these data in a way that is easily accessible and also consumed, because some of these data will be the data that will inform their growth decisions. It will also be the data that will be used to help them get access to finance. So we've been able to put together the data in a way that makes it data that is usable and that is useful also for business. The other issue which you asked about was on the logistics aspect. So in regards to logistics, rather than passing the hassle of trying to understand the entire logistics value chain and process to the small business, trying to deal with the customs in different countries and the different regulatory issues, for us at Anzili, we're able to do that in our backend for them. So basically, once your customer has bought goods from your online shop, your headache ends there. From there, we take over it, and we are able then to allow these businesses to be able to ship, and we can create that visibility for the customer on the other end. We're able to provide tracking numbers. We work with partners, like DHL, to be able to even provide the tracking information for how far along is the order for the customer. Of course, there's a lot of training that is required, in terms of how to standardize goods for them to be acceptable to different customs regimes and countries, and to also pass different regulatory policies. So it's quite important to work with these different regulators to be able to downstream this information to the SMEs, for them to be able to know that if I'm willing or would like to sell my goods to another country, then this is what is expected of me. This is what is required in terms of standardizing what I'm selling, so that it doesn't get to the other end and you're told, oh no, we cannot accept your goods in this kind of packaging, or we do not accept goods that use maybe this kind of input or product, and so on. So it's very important to be able to work with the different regulators to be able to downstream the information to the SMEs. And finally, by working with the shippers, the policymakers, and even bodies like AFCFTA, then we are able to make a more equal and balanced playing field for SMEs to be able to participate in trade, not only in their own countries, but across the entire continent and the world. Thank you, Anne.
Wow, Dayvee, I see a lot that you're doing at Anzili. One of the things that caught my attention is you say that a business can set up on your platform in 1 hour. Is that a challenge I should give to all the businesses who are watching the Africa Trade Conference? Can you go to the Anzili website and let's see if you can be able to set up your e-commerce platform in 1 hour? And you say you had it from the CEO. The other thing I would say, if you'd like to see an example of an Anzili website, you can actually go to the virtual exhibition under Eva's events and flowers, and you will actually go into the website and you can see how that looks like, how you can see the product, how the payments are done. So that will give an example, so that by the time you're actually reaching out to Anzili, you know exactly how that looks like. Thank you, Dayvee. So now go into Jason. It looks like everyone is mentioning DHL as their logistic partner, which means you must be doing something right in Africa. So I would like to then, take time for you to share with us what it is that you do, Jason, as the Senior Director at DHL Express. Share with us the solutions that you have for business people in Africa and how that is actually supporting digital trade. So welcome, Jason, and tell us more about DHL.
Thank you, Anne. And it's great to see the references by many of our participants about the work that DHL is doing with SMEs. For us, everybody sees big corporations that just focused on their big corporation customers. DHL takes a different approach in Africa. We have a very strong focus program across Africa, supporting and upskilling and equipping the SMEs with the ability to trade cross-border. So we run a number of initiatives at the moment. We're running a program called the PECI, the Post-African E-Commerce Initiative. That, for example, involves training SMEs either in classroom environments in Kenya, Ghana, Rwanda, online, and providing them with the skills and expertise to trade cross-border and understand the logistics of trading cross-border. And that's all done at no cost to the SMEs, for example. So we're very focused on training and upskilling and how do we support their businesses. I like the reference to the fact that we do, in fact, look at how do we provide the support and discounting freight rates, for example, and how do we collectively work with the SMEs to support their business, because you understand that it's not cheap doing cross-border trade. And so a lot of work we're doing across Africa is how do we simplify the trade environments for SMEs? How do we help, for example, and a lot of the participants have referenced the AFTA agreement. How do we help realize the objectives of what AFTA wants to do in terms of stimulating and increasing intra-African trade, which is a very small portion of the trade that does get currently facilitated in Africa. So DHL is very much focused on trade facilitation. In fact, in the last year, we set up a DHL division called Go Trade. Together with the German government, there's been significant investments made in Africa in terms of upskilling the SMEs. How do we help them build their programs and expand their product awareness? There's a number of programs that empowers female entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of work being done in terms of the SMEs themselves. In terms of advancing the digital agenda, I do have a presentation which I won't go through now. I know because we're constrained for time, but some of the things that we're doing, I'm just going to my actual notes on that. Some of the things that you can do in Africa in terms of digital trade is COVID has highlighted the importance of digital trade and digitization. That's without a doubt. It's demonstrated the need for it. It's demonstrated to the regulatory authorities the ability to manage that trade-off between risk and how do you protect what comes in and out of the borders, and how do you manage the paper flow against trade facilitation. So COVID has been an ideal tool in a positive way in terms of demonstrating how digitization can actually work and can manage the risk that a lot of authorities are reluctant to allow through digitization. You know, very often people have been used to handling hard copy paperwork. And I once interviewed a customs officer on the ground in one of the countries, and I said, you know, you have a paperless trade agenda in your country where you can use online paperwork to clear the goods. And the lady said to me, no, I've always used hard copy documents. That's the way it's always been. So there's a lot of change management and transformation of the way that people think in order to gain acceptance of the digital trade agenda. And so part of my job as the Director of Trade and Customs at DHL is to facilitate that mindset change and demonstrate how digitization can benefit the customs processes, facilitate trade, simplify and optimize the cross-border trade flows, and how it can generally make the cost of doing that cross-border trade a lot less. You know, I put together matrices for our customers who are wanting to work out what landed costs would be in destination countries in Africa. And the number of different charges, for example, that add to the cost of doing business are significant. And so digitization can come into that and allow us to reduce those costs. And so what we're doing at DHL is we're also making investments in our digital agenda. It's one of our core focus programs. We run a program at DHL, or we have a program called Focus 2025, and it talks about digitalization as being one of the key elements of our focus efforts. So across Africa, we built platforms that enable the SMEs and the online retailers to have flexible delivery solutions, for example. Their customers can go online and select, do they want to pick a parcel up from a DHL facility? Do they want to pick it up from one of our retail partners? The other very important thing that you might be interested that we're doing in Africa is the ability to online pay your duties and taxes, your fiscal charges. So these days, what happens in Africa is when you pick up a shipment anywhere in the world, DHL takes that paperwork, your invoice and your transport documents, we image it, we digitize it, and we transmit it to the destination country who prepares the customs entry. Based on that draft customs entry, we can calculate what the duties and taxes will be for import. We have the ability, before that shipment even arrives in the country, to transmit an electronic message to the customer via email or via SMS with a payment link. They can click on the link, they can pay the duties and taxes before the shipment arrives. And when it arrives, it becomes a very seamless process for us to get the shipment to their customers. So we're harnessing a lot of the technology that enables digitization to facilitate flexible delivery, which is a very, very key element of any SME cross-border trade, is to be able to offer their customers delivery flexibility, the ability to pay online using a secure platform with a credit card or an EFT or other means of payments, that ability to do that online very simply at the simple click of a button. So digitization has become very, very important in facilitating trade and pushing through the objectives of many of the trade facilitation programs, the most important being the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement that was rolled out in January this year. So there's a lot of work that has been done. There is still a lot of work to be done. So for example, in Africa, only 47.8% of paperless trade has been implemented within the Africa region versus the global standard of around 63%. So there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of pushing the digitized agenda. It is making progress. We're seeing a lot more traction. We're seeing a lot more acceptability and understanding of what paperless trade is and what digitization is about. And in the last couple of months, there's been a number of webinars, a number of panel discussions, of the points to be discussed. And a lot of the governments are now looking at how do we help work with the private sector in terms of trade facilitation through digitization. And part of my role is to facilitate and drive that public-private dialogue, because that's essential. You can't do it in isolation as a private sector company. You need to work hand in hand with government to find the way forward in terms of driving that agenda. And another example of data usage, for example, somebody earlier mentioned the use of data. The other thing that we're encouraging the authorities and the regulatory agencies in Africa is to make use of the data that's available online. Digitized information that's available online can be used, for example, to risk profile shipments before they arrive in the country. So instead of everything arriving in the country and putting on hold whilst the customs authorities inspect every single shipment, we're encouraging the authorities to say, make use of the advanced electronic data that you can get about the contents, the value, the importer, the exporter. Use that data and risk assess the customer's shipment based on that information. So when the goods arrive, don't do 100% inspection on every single shipment. That delays trade, it adds costs, and you don't have a happy customer experience. We're saying to the authorities, look at using the data that's available, which some of them have started to do. We've seen it in Rwanda, where they have launched an advanced data screening process, for example, and that's in a pilot phase. We're saying to them, use that data to assess the risk and then facilitate trade through risk profiling instead of taking a one-size old school approach to customs clearance. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of partnership work going on in a lot of countries that we're seeing. And the paperless trade agenda can certainly be advanced by simply looking at online payments, which, as I mentioned, we do already for duties, allowing payments to be made to the customs authorities through e-payments and electronic payments, more reliance on electronic documents such as certificates of origin and other documents that are needed for customs clearance. So there's a lot of opportunity. The only disadvantage, unfortunately, for the SMEs is sometimes the investment costs in the technology that's required. But sometimes it can be as simple as a laptop and a scanner. And that's how simple the process can be in Africa. So for us at DHL, SME expansion is our core focus, more so than focusing on our multinational customers in the sense of driving the SMEs' abilities to increase their business and upskill them. And then, of course, harnessing digitization to facilitate the trade in expansion environment in Africa and facilitating the objectives of AFTA.
All right. Thank you, Jason, for sharing with us what it is that you're doing at DHL, especially with the Go Trade program, really focusing on championing digital trade, digitizing the process, looking at the customs officers, changing their mindset, at the same time also the business community, and really trying to support them to embrace technology and use of trade data. So you're actually looking at it holistically. Yes, you might be a logistic firm, but you recognize for you to actually do business, You need to talk to government, you need to talk to private sector, and everybody is working together to make sure that trade is happening in the continent, especially digital trade. So thank you for that. And because of time, 1 hour goes so fast. What I would like from all of you as panelists is just 30 seconds of your last remarks. If you could just share with all of us on this Africa Trade Conference, if you could just share with us what you think about technology, how can it speed up and reduce costs? Because that's all business people care about. Faster, lower costs, how do you facilitate collaboration, and how do we tackle the issue of trust when you're trading? And that is something Acheaw mentioned. So if you can just give us your last remarks, and then we can go ahead and close this panel. I'll start with you, Jason. Could you tell us your last remarks?
Yeah, so my last remarks is it's embrace technology. Technology is the way of the future. Embrace it, accept it. If you have a mindset against technology, change that mindset and work with, for example, in my role, work with your logistics providers to how you can work together to embrace technology. How can your logistics provider support you in that approach? And look at how you can use technology within your business, because the SMEs will be surprised how easy it is to harness the power of digitization to lower their costs, expand their business and make their business products more accessible globally. We've got customers all over the world buying dried fish from Tanzania, for example. We've got a burgeoning fish market in Tanzania of dried fish, all through the power of digitization and the promotion of those type of products online and through the embracing of technology. And there's a variety of things we're doing to do that. So embracing technology. Technology is your friend, it's not your enemy. Okay, so that's my last thoughts.
Thank you, Jason. 30 seconds, Leonard, can you tell us your last remark?
Well, I'll say the challenge in the context of the AFCFTA now is to see how we could use the AFCFTA and the discussions going on around digital trade to consolidate on some of the achievements that have happened at the national level in terms of digitized processes, whether it is in credit reporting for access to finance, whether it's in access to data, banking data through open banking, and that's relevant for trading services and other financial services in the AFCFTA. So a whole lot of the technology and some of the regulatory reforms that have happened at the national level would then need to be consolidated across the region. So it has to be a process of sharing experiences across countries within the AFCFTA, and that's why some of these things will need to be integrated within the various protocols under the AFCFTA. But basically, we have an opportunity to learn and then to consolidate best practices across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. Across 30 seconds, how do we use technology?
I really think that for me, my key insight is to reduce the barrier to access technology. I only know about certain platforms because of my network and because of research and perhaps because of my education. Not a lot of SMEs have that privilege. There are women who are generating a lot of revenue in different aspects of trade, and or just generally people, and they just don't have that access to information. So platforms such as Anzili, I think being able to increase or increase your communication, ensure that there's collaboration. This platform has given me a new insight already into what other platforms I can access. So really it's for us to reduce the barrier to access to this information, help us with the penetration of more people to onboard in technology.
Okay, thank you, Cost. Information. That's what SMEs need. All right, Dayvee, could you give us your last remarks?
I think the access to technology for SMEs should be made something that is easily accessible. It should be something that a lot of businesses, especially those that are beginning to, just grow, should, that access should be made quite easily available to them. It should be affordable to them, and it should also be access that, is beneficial to them. So like in terms of what we do with our platform, I mean, it's a challenge that we need to be able to also make sure that our reach and more people know about what we're doing, because I believe that there's a lot that we are able to do to help those small businesses to be able to start up and to be able to grow and to be able to scale to be, the multinationals that they all dream to be. So for us, I think it's a challenge. It's something that we're going to keep working on to make sure that any business across the continent is very easily able to get online and begin selling to customers across all corners. Thank you.
Thank you, Dayvee. So Sachin, what do you think about use of technology, reduction of cost, building trust so that we can have more digital trade on this continent?
Yeah, thank you, Anne. I want to leave with a few words, which is collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. With the power of technology, if we all collaborate, be it government agencies, logistics providers, financiers, business, come onto one. Even if we have digital islands, we can open it up to collaborate and share data so that we can make trade much faster and facilitate both cross-border and local trade. I'll leave you with the final African probe, although with a slight tweak. If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, in brackets with Gapstack. Thank you very much.
With Gapstack, go far together with Gapstack. I like that. All right, so with that, I will be ending this panel session and I will hand it over to Acheaw to take us next to the next speaker. Thank you, everybody.